Hello everyone, Andrew here, and welcome to a video where I am going to be talking about the Mario Cement Factory Nintendo Game & Watch. Some people may know that I am a huge fan of Game & Watches and actually own over half of all the ones that were ever released. So I thought it would be fun to make some videos where I show off some of them, let you see what the outside of the console looks like, and also play through the game in both A mode and B mode, and talk about my experience as well as how the game works. Mario Cement Factory was released in 1983, and it is one of the new widescreen models of Game & Watches, so it's basically just a big long rectangle with buttons on each side. And the thing I can compare it to most is kind of holding an NES controller. It's very similar in terms of how it feels to hold in your hand with the corners and everything like that. Some people love the NES controller like me, and some people just can't stand it. On the back, you have, of course, the battery cover and a little stand, which you can bring around. It looks awesome to display it standing up like that, and of course, as it has a clock and watch functionality as well, I guess you could set that beside your bed, and use it sort of as a clock like that without having to always lift it up to see what the time is. What you're looking at right now is when you first put the batteries in, it shows kind of all the different cells that can show up on the screen, and then pressing the time button starts a little bit of a demonstration. Which is, it varies in quality. It's kind of almost like the opening of Super Mario Bros. 1 sometimes, where they just run into Goombas and do silly things, although otherwise it gives you a little bit of insight on how to play the game. So what I plan to do in this video is play through both the A game and the B game, and just talk a little bit about how the game works, and my different thoughts and impressions on the game. So as you can see right there in the demo, not super well versed in the realm of Mario Cement Factory. And yeah, I don't plan to talk too much over the game. That way you can hear all the little bleeps and bloops and really get the full Game & Watch experience out of that. This is also my first time making a video like this, so just bear with me, and if you have any thoughts on how I can make it better or do things differently, please feel free to leave those in the comments. But without further ado, I think we're going to start with A mode. So to start Game A, we're just going to press the Game A button at the top. And here we go. So the point of Mario Cement Factory is that cement is brought from the trucks that are moving along the top of the screen and dumped into the containers on the left and right. You must then control Mario and use the levers to drop the cement from one container to the next before eventually dropping it into the trucks at the bottom. The tricky part here is that each container can only hold up to 3 loads of cement at a time, so any time that cement is dumped into a container which already contains 3 loads, it will overflow and cause a death or a miss. The other way which you can miss is if you use the elevators which you see moving up and down right now, which can be tricky to concentrate on both the cement containers and the movement of the elevators. You must move from elevator to elevator when they are perfectly aligned. Trying to move to the left when maybe there's an elevator a level below you will result in a miss. You cannot just drop down simply like that. Of course, in the beginning it's not too tricky. Things are not moving too quickly yet, but as you pick up more points, because of course the point of Game & Watch games is to score as high as possible, things will start to get trickier and the difficulty will pick up. So as you can see there, when I just moved, I had to wait for the elevator to move down so it was level with the other one before then moving to the other elevator. Otherwise, it would have resulted in a death. And it's really tricky because you need to put your modern video game knowledge aside, which says, if there's something below me, it's okay, because I'll just, drop down to it and it won't be a problem. But Game & Watch rules and physics definitely are not the same you may be used to if you're more of a modern gaming kind of person. Even NES games, of course, Mario 1, you could just easily drop down to a platform below you. So there's a learning curve to playing Game & Watches for sure. As you can hear there, when one of the containers at the tops of the screen, so either the top left or the top right one, is full with 3 loads of cement, you will get that quick beeping sound, alerting you that you need to hurry up and get to one of those before they overflow. And that is nice to have that kind of audio signal, because it's so easy for your eyes to get lost amongst the moving elevators and all the other things that are going on that you might not notice right away. that those are about to overflow. So you receive 1 point for each load of cement that you drop from the upper container into the bottom container, and then 2 points for each load of cement you drop from the lower containers into the trucks. So, unlike some Game & Watches, this one, it's definitely not a game where you rack up points relatively quickly. Definitely does take some time to really get up there in the score. And also, as you can see what I did right there, it's definitely a game of risk, where you need to weigh the risk of, if you think you're fast enough, you can sometimes pull off moves where you run to a lever and then run back to the elevator before it moves, or maybe run across 2 aligned elevators really quickly before they move. But sometimes it doesn't always work out, and you end up missing because an elevator will move just as you go to walk on it. So you definitely need to kind of weigh your options, and if you're really in a rush, you might want to take those chances, but otherwise it's probably best to just take your time, and like right now, there's not really too much reason to do anything crazy with none of the containers ready to overflow. There is also that little compartment at the bottom left beside the truck, which you've seen me use, which you can kind of hide in and wait for the elevators to show up in a way that you prefer before proceeding. Although there isn't one of those at the top, so it's definitely a little easier to get crushed at the top of the screen as opposed to at the bottom. So there you go. There's another one of those situations where it could easily have ended badly, but I made a run for it directly across, and it paid off. Game & Watches also do not have a pause button, so it's definitely an exercise in concentration and, this preparing your mind to not focus on anything else but playing this game for a good, number of minutes, depending on how far you make it. One thing you also need to be aware of is paying attention to the containers at the bottom, because if you drop a load into a container that already has 3 in it, you're going to lose as well. And that one doesn't give you any kind of beeping indication, so it's easy to sometimes mess that up. You can see now how it's starting to get faster and a little bit more difficult. Using that little hidey hole at the bottom. And just like that, it's so easy to lose your concentration and be thinking about the different sides in the elevator that I accidentally pressed the left button there when I definitely shouldn't have. It looks silly, but when you're playing, you definitely realize, you know, it's easy to make mistakes like that. Gotta get back up to that top one. Just barely. You gotta make sure you don't fill it too much, as if I had dropped that one more load there, it would have overflowed, but then I made that mistake anyway, trying to be too quick. So we're up to 2 misses now, and just like most Game & Watches, 3 misses, and it's game over. You need to start again from 0 points. In Mario Cement Factory, getting to 300 points will remove all misses that you have. Although if you have no misses and you get to 300 points, all points will be doubled until you die, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Some Game & Watches it's 200, so I would be very close at this point. But unfortunately not in this game, so still another 100 or so to go before getting those extra lives. Oh, and just like that! Something you need to be very careful of when moving upwards on the elevators is if it's not properly timed, sometimes if you jump on that one that's moving upwards, you will just get crushed against the ceiling. So you really need to use your eyes and say, okay, is there an elevator coming down where if I ride this upwards elevator, I'll be able to jump to it. Unfortunately, in that case, it was not what happened, so game over at 200 points. And now we are going to play Game B by pressing the Game B button. Unfortunately, for some Game & Watches, Game B is significantly different from Game A, or the playing field will somehow be different, or there'll be some new gimmick added in. In the case of Mario Cement Factory, Game B is just a little bit more difficult in terms of speed and how fast the cement comes, a lot like how difficult it gets as you progress through Game A. So we're not going to see too many significant differences in this playthrough, but it's definitely still worth showing, because I don't think that there's too many ways out there to really get experience what the differences between Game A and Game B are on a Game & Watch. Overall, I think that Game & Watches are very interesting, and there's definitely a lot of people who have an interest in them, but information on them can be sparse, so I'm hoping that through any videos I make here, people will be able to learn a little bit more about them. Mario's Cement Factory was actually featured in Game & Watch Gallery 4 if it's something that you think you might want to try out for yourself. There it had, of course, both a modern mode and a classic mode, where in the modern mode, instead of cement, it's actually cookie batter, which you work to get from the top down to the bottom to make cookies. It is also funny when you think about this game, Mario's Cement Factory. It's not like he just works there. It's definitely in the title, Mario possesses this factory. Just another one of those odd jobs that, Mario had back in the day. And I guess they still create some odd jobs for him these days too. Like being a doctor, and he plays all sorts of sports. Mario's just a very, out there guy. Lots of different skills. Hilariously, the one thing you never see him do is anything plumbing related, I guess except for going inside of pipes. Oh, there's a risky move right there, but it paid off. In the Game & Watch Gallery 4 modern version of the game, you can do something I mentioned earlier you cannot do in this version, and that is jump from platforms that have a little bit of a gap between them, because of course in the modern mode it moves a lot smoother. It's not just this very kind of rigid, the elevators move from one place to another. If there is a little bit of a gap between the platforms, Mario can jump down to them, so it definitely makes the modern version significantly easier than the classic version. But there was a silly death caused by pretty much exactly what I was discussing at the moment. Funny how that works. I believe the same rules still apply in Game B, so if we make it to 300 points, that would mean getting our lives back, so still the chance of that. Ooh, just barely made it to that one. Ooh, so there's a situation right there. Ah, yes. Where I tried to move directly across, but as I was doing that, the upwards elevator just happened to move up and sent me to the wrong container, which I then kind of didn't react to properly and ended up dropping cement into the container that was already full. But yeah, you gotta be prepared for that kind of thing. It's definitely what makes this game tricky. It's just paying attention to all the different moving parts at the same time. And I mean, that's pretty much all Game & Watch is training yourself to pay attention to all the different moving pieces so that you don't drop something or so that something doesn't get hit. That's basically how all Game & Watches work in a sense. But I find that Mario Cement Factory is definitely one of the more kind of strict ones in terms of moving parts and you know, being easy to make mistakes. Gotta be careful with those upward elevators. See, that time one was coming down, so we knew it was smart to jump on it. But that's just another thing you would never think of having to worry about, is jumping on that upward elevator and then getting crushed in the ceiling. But it is something that you have to look for. It's another place you have to put your eyes, thus you know, diverting your attention from another area that could probably use the attention. Gotta make sure to get over to that one? Okay, good. Did the very scary, you know, run straight across kind of thing. Just listening to the sounds and playing at the same time, it's very nerve-wracking. It's almost like just kind of sitting in a room with a clock constantly ticking back and forth. And it's very unsettling, I guess. It's hard to explain unless you're playing, but hopefully by me not talking the whole time and allowing you to hear the sounds, you can kind of get the impression of how that would feel to just be playing and hearing those clicks, kind of trying to use them as a signal for how you should move, but also it really comes down to looking at the screen and not relying too much on the sounds. We're almost at 200 though, which is actually where we lost in Game A, so proving that, you know, even though this is supposed to be the more harder, you know, the harder difficulty, we're definitely holding our own here. Although playing with your fingertips is not super easy. I'd probably be doing better if I was using my thumbs, but there you go! We beat our previous Game A high score. Unfortunately, high scores are not saved if the batteries and such are removed, so kind of just gotta write those down, and then, you know, if your friend later asks, so, you know, how high did you score Mario Cement Factory? It's gotta be like, no, I scored like 999, please believe me! In the case of Mario Cement Factory, I have never scored 1,000, so I cannot confirm just how many digits the score counter has. I think that Game & Watches sometimes have 3-digit score counters and sometimes have 4. I believe that in Mario Cement Factory case it is 3, but I could be mistaken because, again, I have never experienced it. Oh, gotta get up to that one. We're 255 now. Gotta get to that left one though. Oh no, and it took me down. And there you go. So again, those nasty elevators can really get you. 257, not too bad considering we actually scored less on the apparently easier game. So one other thing I want to do is just demonstrate what happens when you get 300 points, both when you are missing a life and when you have no misses. In this case, this is when we get 300 points with one miss, and I believe it's also the same with two. It takes you back to absolutely no misses. Just get like a beeping sound, and there you go. Back to pretty much having a perfect game. And in the case of having no misses when getting 300, your score will begin to flash, and all points you receive after that point until your next miss will be doubled. Definitely easier to rack up points like that, but it can be very, very tricky getting to 300 points without making a single mistake. Alright, so with that I think we've talked about just about everything there is to really say about the new widescreen version of Mario's Cement Factory. There was also a tabletop version which I actually do not own, and that version is rather interesting. I would be very excited to play that someday. But in terms of this video, hopefully you all learned something new. And yeah, I hope that you all have, someday the chance to play Mario's Cement Factory as well. And even if not on the original Game & Watch, it is on Game & Watch Gallery 4, which I highly recommend checking out, as it's a great game and has lots of different Game & Watch Gallery, Game & Watch games in there. Hopefully the video quality was okay. I think there might have been a couple of focus issues at time. So again, this is the first time I've made a video like this. I'm definitely going to try and get the kinks out, but please let me know what you thought down in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks for watching, and see you next time for more stuff. So thanks, and see ya.